Hi everyone, it's Jonathan here, and today I'm joined by a very fascinating person who is doing some amazing things. And I've wanted to put together a webinar for you to watch that has a significant meaning, not only to me, but I'm fairly certain to at least half of the world, and I'm hoping the second half of the world as well. Um, I'm a father of two, and I view most of what's happening in the world through the lens of what would be the best outcome for my kids. And in the world we're in, that is very skewed towards a kind of a system, an old system, very male energy system, I look at that through my daughter's perspective quite critically. I have um, a relatively strong concern that the prioritization of women isn't necessarily put to the forefront. And I'm not arguing this from a some form of misandry perspective of, i.e., an anti-male perspective. I'm arguing that in terms of what equality really means and what gender diversity really means. So this is for you. This is a webinar with someone who I believe needs to be heard more, who's doing things and launching activities that need to be seen more and be involved in more, so that ultimately a better future can be created. So, Danielle, tell us about your background. How did you get to where you are today, and where did it all start for you? Where did you grow up?
I was born in America, actually. I was born in LA. My parents moved to Australia when I was very young, and I grew up in Brisbane. My background is in music. I have a PhD in music, but as a little girl growing up, I always loved colour and texture. At school, I won the needlework prizes. When I was 13 years old, I asked my mother if I could go to a state school. I was a privileged girl. I went to a private school. I wanted to go to a state school to study fashion. And that is like saying to a parent that you want to be a stand-up comedian or something. You know, my mother gave me this look. If looks could kill, I didn't have to say anything. I got it straight away. So I never asked her that ever again. And I just went on my path, you know, the academic university path. I went to university and, as I said, I got a PhD and I lived in that world. But this love of color and texture actually never went away. So at the ripe old age of middle age, 40, I just woke up one day and thought I never want to be one of these people 6 foot under butt. And I knew that I had the skills to change it. I didn't realize it would be as hard as it has been. Thank God, I didn't know, but I just went on the journey. I had a handmade knitting label myself. It was called Danielle Chiel.
Okay.
I sold it for maybe a year, and that's when the legislation changed. So I just had started a new career. The legislation changed. I had nowhere to make my garments. I was looking at other countries. I looked at Vietnam, New Zealand, America, India. I was looking everywhere to work out where I was going to get my garments made if it couldn't be Australia. And I'm always really lucky in life. I've always met the right person at the right time. And somebody said to me, "Oh, Danielle, I know someone I can introduce you to in India who can make these garments." And we emailed back and forth on numerous times, and they did everything they could to discourage me from coming. And after quite a few weeks of emailing, I just said, "Look, I don't really care what's happening. I'm getting on a plane and I'm coming." The bit that came into my head of I can do more was the first meeting of the First Lady in India. They took my hand and the way that they looked me in the eye. There was some connection of this whole female thing. We just looked at each other, and I'm even getting goose pimples now telling you. I can recall the minute.
And then you fly back to Australia, and what was the first thing you then did?
I closed down my brand and I compiled a list of other brands because I didn't come from a background industry. So I bought a fashion magazine. I walked down the street. I wrote down the name and phone number of every brand of everywhere that I ever went and
Wow.
just called every single one of them. 6 weeks later, I was back on the plane. I went there every 6 weeks initially. But the second time I went back, I realized that the ladies couldn't read. So I had to think, my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to manage this? So knitting is a language, and every stitch can actually be graphed out on graph paper. Every little V is a graph paper. So what I did is I photocopied a whatever it is, 0 pieces of paper,
Yeah.
and I actually got commercially printed on graph paper these garments, and I drew them all out, and I spent morning, noon, and night, because I knew I only had 10 days before I was back on the plane again, drawing everything I wanted these ladies to knit. So I got on the plane with rolled up massive pieces of paper. It weighed a ton. It looked like surfboards, this massive thing that had to go in the hold of these rolled up pieces of paper. So at this stage, I and them had not learnt a common language of what I call knitting jargon words. So they were doing this with their hands, and I would sort of show them, and they got it. So when they were doing it, I would point to the graph paper. And it was from doing that. And then I'm like, this is called a K. And I'd get a pen and I'd write it down. And then it's like 4, K4, knit 4. So I taught them to read jargon knitting English from those big graph charts. So I think I did that probably 2 or 3 times when I went, definitely more than once. It was just a massive, massive amount of detailed work, and they got it. And so before very long, I flew in different teachers from around the world to teach them to grow their skills. So their skills went way past mine very early on in the piece.
And how did it feel when when the first person produced something, or the first group of women produced something successfully? That must have felt incredibly empowering, like, or as if you've achieved something. I mean, that's a needle shift, especially in their lives, right? I mean, that's probably the first thing they've ever done outside of what their role is.
Yeah, well, I just remember that moment as being hysterically funny, because what they did is they finished the parts. They were so proud. They finished. So they gave me one sleeve, one front in bits. And I'm like, but of course they go. And so this was very difficult to get any communication there at all. So it was very hard. So these words, yes and no, became crucial, that we're all on the same page. So yes and no were our founding words in common.
Well, it's almost like it's like building a new society, isn't it? It's like, okay, let's set the boundaries. Let's kind of set up what good looks like, what, but not so good looks like. Did you ever uh, l- lose your patience, or because you appear to have the patience of a saint? Did you ever have to kind of like count to 10 before saying something, or was it just naturally just so rewarding that you didn't? There was no pressure at all.
Um, yeah, I've lost the plot. I lost it with the bank manager big time. And that's caused a big sensation, because I did get what I needed and what I wanted. And from then on, it wasn't like a joke. And I lost it with the ladies themselves one time, because they're like, running these things. It's like running a kindergarten sometimes. I even joke. It's like I feel like I'm running a circus. Um, they act out, and I go mad on them. Tough love, or whatever you like to call it. And because it's that, I'm just really proud of them. It's like a mother wanting to show off their kids to the world.
How did the name Coco come about?
Well, like my whole journey, I actually never claim that I'm responsible for any of it. It's always the amazing people around it. And so people are always fascinated to hear my story. And I was telling the story about how one person knits one garment. And in the fashion industry, that's particularly important, because I don't view these humans as a unit of labor. Apart from anything else, no one can knit all day and not like it. So I was telling somebody in the fashion industry how one person makes one garment and it's not part of the conveyor belt. And they said to me, Danielle, that seems like it's so important to you. And I said, well, yes, because if you've never been to school and you've never actually done a project, Do you remember, like, I'd like to ask you, Jonathan, can you remember in primary school or high school, the first project that you ever did by yourself and handed it in?
Yeah, I think the first project I ever did was to write a piece of music when I was 5. I think that's the first one I remember.
And why do you remember it?
I think it was probably my first version of creativity that I was allowed to do whatever I wanted. So basically, there are notes on a stave, and then a blank canvas. Other than the 5 lines, there was no other. There's no other instruction. So there's 5 lines and 12 options, and so that for me was huge, and that's before I knew about the bass clef. So yeah, it was just a giant open creativity canvas, freedom.
So you were given freedom, exactly the word that was going to come out of my mouth. So you were given freedom. And when the people around you heard the result of that freedom, what did they say?
It was extremely well received. It's probably the first time I remember my parents congratulating me on doing something, other than successfully kicking a ball or successfully, climbing up a ladder or something in a tree house. It's kind of like they were amazing. And then I brought it into school, and the teacher wanted me to play it in front of the rest of the class. And so yeah, I felt a huge sense of accomplishment and achievement.
So can you imagine of never having that sense of accomplishment? So you've never done anything that's ever been shown to anybody from any reward. Your parents have actually never acknowledged you for achieving anything. So in that piece of music that was all yours, like to this very day, dare I be so cheeky to say, in your middle aged area, you still remember that incident from when you were 5 years old. It was so important.
Yeah.
So these ladies had never ever experienced that until they completed their first jumper. So they're like 2 decades behind the first time that you've ever experienced that, more than 2 decades. And so the feeling for them, it's that sort of thing is really directly impactful on your own self-esteem, because otherwise, how do you ever get the feeling of I can do this? So other than cooking a meal that you're forced to be able to cook,
Mm.
this is the first time this I can do this feeling is felt. So I was telling a friend in the fashion industry how important it was to have one person make one garment and the impact it had on their self-esteem,
Right.
because never before in their whole life had anybody actually accomplished one thing outside making a meal for their house. So I was telling them this story and they said, "Oh, wow, Danielle, you're changing lives." And I'm like, "Well, I'm just trying to teach them how to knit, really." And they said, "No, no, there's much more at stake here." And so I said, "Okay, well, knit one." And just very flippantly, they said, "Change one." And we're like, "Okay, we've got it." And that's how it came about. We're a company that is, in essence, a manufacturing company that specializes in hand knitting. We do one thing, hand knitting, and we do it really well.
And so, if I'm a brand, the customer of this is a fashion brand, I guess, or a clothing retailer.
A fashion
And they,
brand.
okay, and they come to you and they ask for a bespoke set of items in a bespoke design. I imagine they provide the designs to you.
They provide the designs to me, and then I have a discussion with them. So, of course, I set up the business to specialize in knitting, but by default, if we didn't help them source the yarns and write the patterns, I wouldn't have that enterprise. I wouldn't have that business at all. So, I buy the yarns for 95% of the company. So, I deal with all the mills all around the world. And also, we have specialized pattern writers to do that. But when they come to me with various designs, because we do this all day and all night, and it's a Western company, like, of course, there are other hand knitting units around the world, but they don't often have what I call a Western taste of fashion and standards. So most of the garments, regardless of whether it's a big brand or a little brand, because I do it all day and all night, has my stamp on it. So I'm forever saying, "Have you thought about doing this here? Or if you put this sleeve here?" And they're like, "Oh, wow, that's great, thank you." And then, so we buy the yarn, we write the pattern, we knit, and we give it back to them.
Right, excellent. And so, when we first met, you were that was your business. That was, and it still is your business, but that was the main thing, and the only thing that we're focusing on. And then, so this is during the time that the COVID-19 situation first reared its head, and had kind of impacted society and impacted business, not least all of our customers and clients and consumers, and also our own businesses. What happened then?
The whole world had closed down. There were no planes, nothing was going. And from my journey in India, I was quite well connected, and I knew the people in the Chennai Chamber of Commerce. And I received this email from one of them that said, Danielle, there are 16 million people who work in the fashion industry in India that are currently unemployed. Please read this article. Can you do something to help? And 24 hours later, I thought, you know what? I've always wanted to deal with the other mediums. I never knew how. All these brands that I deal with would love access to all the other mediums of these people that were unemployed: embroidery, block printing, crocheting. There's umpteen dozen different kinds of embroidery throughout India. That's how the Artisan Nation was born. So the Artisan Nation is about empowering female creators from developing countries. We're a nation that is not bound by geography, language, or culture. We're a nation that is unified by passion, creativity, and talent. We have three missions. We help women grow stronger, we unleash their potential, and we give them regular work. Within those three missions, there are various subgroups, and it's all spelled out very clearly on our website. The three subgroups for growing stronger is that we distribute face masks, we enable access to fresh, clean drinking water, and we provide fresh, healthy food. In the unleashing potential, we make sure that they have access to a dietitian, because all these ladies eat is rice. None of them have a balanced diet. We provide access to psychologists. We employ dedicated physical movement leaders, and we have annual blood tests for them. And of course, equally important is that they're alive. Once they stay alive and are healthy, is that they get regular work. So in order to do that, it's my job to make sure that they do have regular work. And as part of their regular work, they use a smartphone, and we increase their financial literacy, because they have to be able to read numbers to knit. And so for the first time, these ladies, when they go to the shops and they see the numbers, they can work out whether they're getting the right change or not, and how the numbers actually work.
So on the artisannation.com, companies can go there and get involved. How does that work? How do the companies actually get involved in the Artisan Nation?
Well, on the website, there are three levels of involvement, depending on how many lives actually and how many women that you'd like to impact. So we have one level that is the Cheer Squad, and if you want to impact 175 lives, that's the level for you. We have another level that's the Artisan Participator, and that impacts directly on 525 lives. And then the top tier is the Artisan Champion, and that impacts on 1,575 lives per month.
Can individuals also get involved in the Artisan Nation?
100%. There's a section there that individuals can give whatever they like, and it will go directly to the ladies, either getting their children's eyes tested or their eyes tested, and they can choose whether they'd like to give a small amount weekly, monthly, or quarterly. The key message is to know that they're directly empowering women in these developing nations. The second thing they need to do is just to decide how many lives they'd like to impact, because the way that they're going to do that is ensuring that these women are going to stay healthy enough that they can go to work and lead a stable life.
The Artisan Nation is not a charity, which means that, of course, companies that get involved aren't ones that just want to use it as a tax write-off. They actually need to be willing to invest into something that is a for-profit organization. Why is it a for-profit organization?
The most important reason is that it enables the women to become profitable themselves. How could we do all this work if they are not profitable themselves? We would be a very bad role model.
So if I'm a company or an individual wanting to support this, what's the best way of getting in touch with you?
Please go to the artisannation.com website. and scroll down and choose the package, and it just says click here, and the email will come directly through to me and I'll call you straight away.
So thank you, Danielle. It's a massively inspiring story, and the mission, I think, most people in the world, if they realize the importance of, would find it resonant. I am honored to have met you and helped you bring this forward into people's attention. I can only hope that I'm being part of a cog of a wheel that enables you to enable more female empowerment through them actually having the skills and the resources to find their own identity and their voice. And so, as Danielle mentions, if anyone is watching this that wants to get involved, please do go to theartisannation.com. Please do email Danielle at theartisannation.com as well. From there, the Koco.global is a brilliant initiative and obviously is a member of the Artisan Nation. And there are more members of the Artisan Nation that you'll see on the website. And if any of you feel that you want more details, you can obviously email Danielle at the Artisan Nation, but also look inward and feel, is this the type of activity that will actually enable us to ensure that females are more empowered now and in the future? And if you feel that that's something that resonates, you'll know already by watching this whether this actually is happening inside you. If you're being stirred by this message, then please act now, because these are real lives at stake. These are people who, as you are watching this, are actually on the brink of either having their identity not found or collapsing, or living inside an imprisoned society and culture that actually is rigged against them being empowered. So now is the moment. This is the initiative to take action on. And there is no time like the present. Please do get in touch. And if not, please do at least go to theartisannation.com and donate an amount so that we can actually continue the work to enable these brilliant and majestically, beautifully creative women to be more empowered. Danielle, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Jonathan. Pleasure.